15% before I put this down, so I doubled where I was, and I still did not care about anything happening in this book. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, we are going to be doing a Second Chances reading vlog. Alright, before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments what's a book that you gave a second chance and actually ended up really enjoying. If the title of this video doesn't give it away, I am going to be giving books that I had previously not finished a second chance. These are books I put down for some reason or another. Maybe I wasn't vibing with it before, maybe I just wasn't in the right mindset, or for example, with one of them, I was reading too many books in that one genre already and I needed to put one down. I'll be honest with you guys, I filmed for one of these like last year, then the rest of the books just got put on the back burner and I didn't touch this. So one of these books I read in 2023. The other two were more recent. I have a bunch of video plans floating around up here, and sometimes they don't get prioritized as soon as others. And this was one of them that didn't get prioritized last year, so it finally is now, and I am really excited for this because I love the idea of these, giving a book a second chance that hopefully the next time around I'll really end up enjoying it, but we'll see. Sometimes though, the Nat of the first try was correct and right to put it down. So first up is Ace of Shades by Amanda Foody. This is following our main character, N, who from a smaller, more provincial town. There must be more than this provincial life. And ends up going to Sin City trying to find her mother, who has recently gone missing. And the only instructions her mother left her were to look for Levi Glazier. But when she meets him, turns out Levi is a mafia boss and a con man, and she doesn't know what to do with that information because she's always considered her mother a very respectable woman who is a journalist. However, it seems she might have gotten herself into more trouble than she was expecting. But N is still determined to find her and is going to force Levi into helping her. Last time I read this one, it just wasn't really working for me at that moment. I was really excited for this story because of all of the aesthetics of the book. It's based in a town that's very reminiscent of Las Vegas. I mean, there's the cards on the cover, all of the suits that are utilized for the the different suits are utilized for decoration throughout the book, so I was just really intrigued by this one. It's an older YA fantasy that I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about, so I've been very intrigued. He just apparently is in the mood for some attention. Okay, handsome, you're so cute, but I need you to sit down. You're very distracting, and I'm worried your tail is gonna rip out my microphone. Next one was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This I actually tried to read twice, but both times it was in November. November, I really tried to prioritize nonfiction books for the nonfiction November readathon. Then December is my reread month, so I get really excited to revisit books I've loved in the past. And I think both of those things sort of worked against my actually getting She Who Became the Sun read. This is a historical fantasy in which we're following this girl who has been foretold to have nothingness in her future, whereas her brother is supposed to come into all this fame and glory. But eventually she actually ends up taking her brother's identity. I think there's some aspects of the story that do have a basis in real Chinese history. I'm very interested in this one, and I have heard some positive things on it, but it is definitely a more divisive fantasy. I'm so interested to see how the historical parts work with the fantastical elements. I really want to like this one. I really wanted to give it a fair chance, which is why I put it down the two prior times. Last one is the one I'm most nervous about, if I'm being honest, and that is Legendborn by Tracey Deonn. I tried to read this one in like April of 2023, and it wasn't working for me because I was already in the middle of two other fantasy books that I was really loving. So starting into a third just wasn't working out. I wasn't really getting engaged with the main character or the plot that was unfolding, so I decided to put it down and come back to it. This one's been really popular. It's a modern retelling of Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, I believe, where we're following this young woman, Bree, who goes to stay at this college for like an early education thing, but her mother did not want her to attend this. First night there, she ends up seeing some weird magic things go down, and when one of the people involved tries to cast a spell and make all of the students forget whatever just happened, Thank you. You hit my microphone exactly like I was worried about. It doesn't work on her. And it opens up this whole new magical world to Bree, and she starts to investigate. Perhaps, maybe these people might have possibly been behind why her mom didn't want her to go here, and also her mom's recent passing. I don't actually know that for sure. I'm just totally throwing out a guess there. But I am intrigued to try this out. Again, very popular, so I've been really nervous ever since I DNF'd it the first time to return to it, because what if I don't like it? Please don't hate me if I don't like it, okay? And so on that note, I will talk to y'all again in the past when I was reading Ace of Shades for a second time. Hey guys, so I have officially started into Ace of Shades. This time around, I actually did start at the very beginning. I had got about 100 pages in on my first try, but I wasn't vibing with it. It wasn't working. I don't think I was in a fantasy mood at the time. Now it's working a little bit better. So we have N, who is a very naive 17-year-old girl who's trying to find her mother in the city of Sin. And apparently the country she is from is actually known for being a bit outdated. They essentially have morals of 30 years prior, which obviously doesn't work great in Sin City. I know the city has an actual name, but I never remember it. And then she ends up running into our male main character, Levi, who is a gang lord, essentially, at 17, because of course he is, which I have come to realize is one of the few problems I have with YA fantasies now as an adult. Teenagers being in these very serious situations. No, I'm not gonna believe that the 17-year-old has enough street cred to lead a gang, particularly when we see he's apparently not that good at leading the gang. He is desperately trying to dig his way out of debt, and then also sort of in the pocket of this casino owner, but he absolutely hates her, and then still trying to take care of all of his people, and now he is having to help N find her adoptive mother, Lourdes. The main reason being that N told him if he helps her do this and they find Lourdes, she will pay him 10,000 volts. Volts are apparently like physical electricity that this world uses as money, which can either be held in your skin or in a glass ball. Also, people have two different abilities that either come from your father or your mother, and usually you lean towards one or the other more so. N, for example, has a mathematic and dancing ability, but she's not particularly proficient in either of them, whereas Levi has orb making, the little things that the volts are held in, and then his other one is the ability to see auras, but he only really can do it with people he knows very well, so not super useful, and he doesn't do the orb making at all. I will give the author credit that as far as fantastical settings, casinos, gangs, also there was some sort of a political civil war like 25 years ago that apparently Lourdes was a sympathizer for the losing side, and that's a problem. Yeah, there's a lot going on in this book, and I am just shy of that 100 pages I read prior, and I'm still sort of lost. The atmosphere work is pretty strong. I'm not the biggest fan of how the world building has been done because so much of it just gets dumped on us. Levi is an interesting character, and when we're in his perspective, everything is told to us in a way where it's like very matter of fact, whereas in N's perspective, Levi is having to explain all of this to her. So when we're in N's perspective, I do like the world building more because it's actually explained to us, not kind of just told and then moved on. However, N is very naive and very out of her element, which makes her not the most interesting character to follow. She's also pretty emotional, which on one hand, like, makes sense. Her mother is missing. But on the other hand, I just feel really uncomfortable reading her crying at the drop of a hat. Levi is also bisexual, so that's got some cool representation there. Every other character we have met thus far is pretty bland. As far as starts of books go, this is intriguing, but like not the best. And I do want to know where things are gonna go from here, but I can understand why I put this down previously, seeing as how I just wasn't really vibing with it at the time. And even now, I don't know if it's fair to estimate a rating at only 100 pages in, but like right now I could see this just being a 3-star read. Hello, beautiful people. So I've continued my read of Ace of Shades. Currently, I am at page 306. I wouldn't say I'm like absolutely obsessed with this book, but I am still enjoying it enough that it's keeping me engaged and I'm working through it. I don't really like either of our main characters so much that they're the thing keeping me here. It's really the plot. I'm very intrigued specifically about 𝗏's background because the more we learn about what she doesn't know, the more interested I am. I'm still a little confused as far as like the historical elements of this world. We know there was like a civil war roughly 25 years ago, and the misers were the people who ended up being defeated, overthrown. I think they're the ones who kind of originally created volts, which are the energy that's used as money in this world. I don't know. See, I still have questions about all of that. I still have questions about the powers and how all of those work. We recently met this one character. It's pretty cool right out of the get-go, but she has this very badass ability where she can like sort of see people's auras, but she can also see regrets. She can see things they desperately want. She can see curses that are attached to them, which is another thing. Apparently curses exist in this world too. The more we learn about the world, the more questions I have, which by this point I don't necessarily think is a good thing. There was some excitement in regards to Levi and the whole gang situation he's involved in, which I saw coming literally from the very first interaction with his gang. So yeah, it's exciting, but not really surprising. There's a side character that 𝗏 ends up working with who, she has a complicated relationship with this person, but I have to say, I think that person's actually my favorite character. Her name is Lola. Honestly, she doesn't seem that important to the grand scheme of everything, but she and 𝗏 are sort of becoming friends. I don't know. I still don't really know if I'm going to continue the series or not at this point. I'm not invested. I'm interested, I guess. I'm intrigued. I want to know more, but I don't know if I want to take the time to know everything. Even though I'm giving this book a second chance, I may end up DNFing the series. We'll see. I don't know. Hey y'all, so I officially finished out 𝗖cie ich 𝘁ฆ์ by foody, and this was an experience. I'm gonna be honest, I don't really know if it was worth going back to this book and finishing it out, because by the end of it, this just wasn't a satisfying ending, and I have no idea where things are gonna go from here. I have no clue of how the series is going to progress forward, and I don't really care. I think my favorite part of this book on the whole was the atmosphere, the aesthetic that went throughout the story. I think the author did a phenomenal job of consistently sticking true to the Sin City theme. I love by the end of the book that we were able to see how the city has actually affected 𝗏 and how it has changed her character, how her entire experience of trying to find her mother and living within the city, almost being a member of a gang, interacting with all of these people she has changed her so much from the prim and proper girl who came. That was fantastic, I will say, especially when it came to the climax scenes. Wow, I did not expect this to take some of those turns. But prior to it, when we were on the lead up, when we're slowly making our way to the climax, there were some events that occurred that I think the author was doing to try and take us off guard, but I saw every one of them coming. Once the climax started though, I was reinvested, but there's this major event that takes place and I'm still not really sure I know what happened there. I didn't feel like I truly understood what was going on, so it made that situation a little less suspenseful because I was trying to figure out like, okay, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? Like, how are we moving through? I still am not sold on the brewing romance between Levi and 𝗏. You can definitely tell these two have feelings for each other from very early on, and by the end of the book, it's kind of like neither of them are acknowledging these because they think things will change. So much has changed already at this point. Just acknowledge it. Like, just talk about it. You guys have lived through so much together by this point. But again, I also wasn't convinced by it, so I don't care that deeply. I did feel a slight bit of tension between these two right at the end, but like I said, it's as though the book just suddenly ends and that's it. Then the epilogue is, I guess, relating to the events of the next book, but because I don't really understand what happened at the end of this one, I don't really get the implications of what that's setting up. I don't understand how they're relating to the events we've just watched unfold, so why should I care to pick up 2 more books that are pushing 500 pages for this? Yeah, so like my final compile breakdown came out to 3.5 stars on this. It was fine. And I'm sure once upon a time this was like really great and definitely stood out in regards to YA fantasy. Not so much now. The world itself is the most interesting thing, but even now I still don't fully understand the magic system, and that definitely annoys me. Hey guys! So I have officially started back into She Who Became the Sun. I really thought I had read further, but according to Goodreads, last time I tried to read this, I only got like 26 pages in, which was 3 years ago. And then 2 years ago, I don't actually know how far in I got because apparently I didn't mark it on Goodreads, but I do remember starting listening to the audiobook and I did get further than the first time. Not sure where. Reminder, the reason I DNF'd this one was not because it was going badly, but rather I just wasn't really feeling a historical fantasy story at the time. Here, I'm finally trying again. Plus, I have two things to keep me accountable with this book. One, I'm buddy reading it with Sam McGriff-Reeds. Then second, I chose it for my book club pick in my fantasy book club this month. I have to read it. I don't have a choice. Thankfully though, I am actually at about 202 pages in. I am liking this more. It starts a bit slow, I will say. The first part of the story is it almost feels like a historical nonfiction story. It's really dense and mostly just setting up the time period as well as the really rough upbringing our main characters had because of the fact that she's a girl, her family is quite poor, and there's a famine/drought going on. So not really the most positive foot to start out on. And I can totally get why Past Now was not in the mindset for this book when I was about to go into holiday time. But now that I've finally gotten to, I think I'm in part 3, I am actually pretty invested into our main character. She takes over her brother's identity. She still thinks of herself in female terms. For all purposes, she identifies as her brother. She is her brother's name. She only ever thinks and tries to act as her brother would based on what her brother experienced because she literally wants to like trick heaven into giving her her brother's fate. And so I actually am pretty invested into her because I like the fact she is so determined to achieve greatness. And I appreciate the fact that it's acknowledged how greatness at the beginning isn't something she can really define. It is not a set thing. She knows what she wants, but eventually she does sort of put that together and can officially label it as such. One issue I am having is after part 1, we have alternate perspectives. One of them is a general for the Mongols who are currently in power in China at this time. He is a eunuch and not by choice. His family was slaughtered and he chose this rather than dying. And this choice has really impacted his reputation because he comes from a traitorous family and then he chose something that is frowned upon, that is so cowardly rather than choosing to die. And yet he has become like the right-hand man to the prince of this Mongol dynasty. Initially, I didn't really care about his perspective, but there's a reveal as to his background and as to what is driving him to continue doing these things. And that's when I finally started to get intrigued. But we don't only have his perspective, we also have the prince's younger brother, who both hates and loves the prince, but also sort of hates Ouyang as well, even though they kind of can identify with one another, seeing as how they're both considered cowards, but like for very different reasons. Then through Zhu, we don't only see through her perspective, we see through the eyes of this thief who she kind of not adopts, but like he joins her for part of her journey. We also see through the perspective of some of the other Red Turban Rebellion members. Then we also see through the eyes of Mei, who is she's not a princess, but like a higher ranked woman who Zhu sort of endears herself towards because Zhu biologically is a woman and she knows that all of the misogynistic crap of this time period that women are fed isn't true. So she encourages Mei to kind of push against that. I do like that element of the story. I think it's very interesting. I don't really feel like a lot of these perspectives are actually necessary. I think I would much prefer if we just followed Zhu and Ouyang. In Ouyang's perspective, I feel like things drag a little bit more, mostly because in his perspective, there's more discussion around the politics of this time period and world building around this time in history. On one hand, is interesting, but on the other hand, it's not done in the clearest way. I still was having a hard time following along with what was actually being explained. I ended up going to Wikipedia, if I'm being honest, and kind of trying to piece together everything from the Wikipedia page into what I was seeing in the book. The plot itself is pretty interesting, but it's also quite slow paced at this point. For a lot of the story, it really feels like we're building up Zhu's character, and then now we're starting to explore Yu-Yong's character. As far as like the war elements go, they're not nearly as action filled, as bloody, as stereotypical war scenes as I expected. So this is going a lot better this time around, but I'm still not really in love with the story thus far. I think the commentary that can go on around Zhu and Yu-Yong between their sex versus their gender is interesting, and I would like to see a little bit more of that, especially in Yu-Yong, because that hasn't been touched on quite as much in compared to Zhu's. But still, I think that's a very interesting element that Chan included into the story. Overall though, like I said, going better, still not fantastic. Hi guys, so I just realized that I don't know what happened to my previous update where I finished She Who Became the Sun. It like disappeared. So I'm gonna refilm that. So yes, I finished She Who Became the Sun. Unfortunately, I don't think it was really worth me returning to this book in the end, honestly. Objectively, this book was really interesting. Like, I did learn a lot about Chinese history, but I wouldn't really call this an entertaining read, an engrossing story. I did really enjoy the author's commentary around gender with both of our main characters, what with one of them presenting as a man, but she is not a man, and especially in the second half of the book, whenever she finally starts to struggle with her gender identity and how she does still feel like a woman, but is again being acknowledged as a man in her everyday life. And then on the opposite side with the general, I thought it was very cool that we had a male character who'd been castrated, so oftentimes in his society, unfortunately, he is not acknowledged as a true man, but he still is. I thought those elements of each character were very well handled, and anytime we would get a little bit more exploration around those, I did start to feel more strongly about each of the characters. And apart from that, I guess I would say I did really enjoy the fact that each of them are so determined to get what they want. However, apart from those like two aspects, I didn't really feel very strongly about these main characters. I didn't feel strongly about the relationships they had, the dynamics they had with the characters around them. As a character-based reader, I mean, that definitely is going to impact my enjoyment. I also think the fact that we spend some time in other people's perspectives apart from these two was sort of wasted page time that could have been building out those characters a little bit more. Yes, those people might have helped further the story, but by the end of it, I don't really think their perspectives were really necessary. I also was expecting a lot more war to take place in this book, but rather I feel like it is very much a politics story, slow moving. I mean, there is some military action, but those scenes didn't give me what I was wanting. And because of that, the plot really dragged. I just wanted more excitement from the story. I think the only times I was really glued in was in those maybe one fight scene and then like the confrontation scene at the end of the book. Then finally, this is sold as a fantasy book. And yes, there are fantastical elements, but really this is a historical story because the fantasy elements don't even really impact the plot at all. Maybe they'll be more relevant in the sequel, but in this one, it was like take it or leave it. This just came down to not living up to what I expected of the story, unfortunately. I don't think I'm gonna continue the second book. My rating for this was a 3-star, right down the middle. I'm glad I finally got around to reading it. Like I said, there were some elements of the story I did enjoy, but overall, if I had just left this DNF'd and never returned, I don't think I would have missed out on much. Hey friends, so I tried. I really did. I tried again. I got further this time into Legendborn by Tracey and I once again unfortunately have decided to DNF this at about the 30% mark. Last time I think I did 15% before I put this down, so I doubled where I was, and I still did not care about anything happening in this book. I think there are elements of this story that work very well for me, but overall I just could not get invested into this. And I think part of that might be the way the magical elements are being presented. So much of it is done in these giant info dumps. We watch Bree as she kind of forces her way into the secret society, and she gets 10 minutes. 10 minutes for Nick to explain everything to her so that she can follow along, and we time jump over that. Somehow Bree understands everything in that 10 minutes, meaning whenever a new element of the world is revealed, she explains it in her head and, you know, by extension explains it to us. And I was having such a difficult time understanding how everything worked here. I think elements of the magic system were really cool, like the utilization of ether and the tiebacks of their families to like Arthurian legend and Knights of the Round Table. Very awesome. The nitty-gritty stuff, I had no idea what was going on. And again, every time it's presented, it's done in a way where there's a ton of info dumping. So I don't understand how you spend so much time explaining everything and yet I'm still confused. On top of that, there's a shocking number of named characters. And I'm a character-based reader. I love characters. There's so many that are named that don't matter. Once she joins this secret society, like 20 people are introduced to you in a chapter and everybody's just throwing their information at you. I don't think any of them have mattered since that chapter. None of these named characters feel like they have any depth to them, including the two that are very obviously going to be the possible love interests for this little romantic triangle. I knew going in, so I was trying to prepare myself, and I still was annoyed by it because it's just, both love interests are so stereotypical. You've got the goofy, nice, lovable one, and you've got the asshole with the tragic backstory. I don't feel strongly about either of them, apart from the fact that I really disliked how the asshole one was treating her. That's just a very negative way to introduce a character who's going to have romantic tension with your main character. And that's coming from somebody who enjoys enemies to lovers. Dude went a few steps too far. I like Bree. I do like her as a main character. I think she was headstrong. She was full of gumption. She had a lot of moxie to her. She was desperate to figure out what happened with the society that connects to the death of her mom, and that's kind of like the mystery element of the plot that's pushing things forward. But from looking at other reviews, it seems that part of the plot actually takes a very long time to really develop, and I just don't feel strongly enough to push through another 300 pages of this book for no real answer, because this is only the first book in the series. I also liked how Bree's grief was being presented. Her mom passed shortly before the events at the start of the book, and we're watching Bree as she tries to continue living her life as though everything is normal when a very integral person to her life is no longer there. And so I think the author actually was presenting grief in Bree so well, and this very before and after aspect of her life, given the fact that that was such an impactful event. But there were also little instances to Bree's character that were kind of irksome. For example, how she treats her best friend is her roommate here. It was just kind of a little grating. It definitely showcased to me that she is 16 and this is a YA novel. It's my second try, and I once again was just bored, having a hard time actually getting invested into the story. I was nearly 6 hours into the audiobook, and that's just so much time to dedicate to a book when I'm not enjoying it. I'm officially giving up on this one. That's a shame. It looks like this is another book that I'm gonna be an outlier for. I really wanted to enjoy it. It wasn't working for me, and I do really think it's down to the writing. So, hey guys, so I'm editing this video and came to realize that I never filmed an exit. I don't have any sort of outro. So here is future Nat to do that for y'all. Yeah, basically the roundup of this video is that with these books, first time Nat knew what she was talking about. She knew what she was doing when she put them down. And the Nat of this video really should have listened to her. But even so, I do love whenever I give a book a second chance and I end up enjoying it the second time around. But it seems that was not it for these books. So on that note, that is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me the sunshine emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!